It's been almost 2 decades since we started our journey to educate and help you take action so you may better manage your financial future. Our goal is to help you accomplish your life's purpose. This podcast reveals financial tips, strategies, and insights that will help you to set your financial goals and guide you along the way. This is Managing Your Financial Future, brought to you by the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. All right, let's manage your financial future. What do you say, huh? We're here. I'm here. Professor Rick Plum.
I'm here.
CFP professional, certified financial planner professional is here. With me, I'm Johnny Dean, your podcast host. Thanks so much for joining us. Episode number 135 or something like that. We're just cranking along. We're going to have a big celebration for episode number 200 here in about a year and a half. So get the party started. All right? We are grateful to all of you folks who listen to this podcast, and thank you for tuning in. Spotify, of course, and iTunes. It's been nice. We get some new listeners here on iTunes and some folks giving us some nice compliments along the way. So we do thank you for those. We read all the emails. I don't necessarily repeat all the emails, but I do read all of the emails. So one of the things that was pointed in my direction here, and it's something we haven't really talked about for quite a while, and it has to do with, Professor Plum, it has to do with running out of money.
Which is hardly ever a good thing.
No. And I just did a little search here, as we do from time to time, about retirees' biggest fears, people's biggest fears about retirement, that kind of thing.
Right. Health and retirement and running out of money.
Well, believe it or not, health doesn't really, people aren't as afraid of that as they are of running out of money. Running out of money is like the top.
Yeah.
It just about every poll that I've seen.
And it affects the stress level going into retirement, which affects your health. It affects the stress level, which affects your relationships. It affects your ability to make rational decisions about investing.
Yeah.
That anxiety and stress can have a fairly detrimental effect on multiple phases of your life, and your money being part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like having a refrigerator full of food and knowing that the stores are closed forever, and you got to make that food last. Or
maybe the refrigerator's not as full as you would like it to be.
It's not
either.
as full. Right, you're going to have to cut down on the food, and that's kind of what they're talking about. This just says it as well as all out of the New York Post just a couple days ago. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans plan to retire. Who doesn't plan to retire? I guess people who just want to work forever.
Or they just don't plan.
That's true. But of those who don't think they'll retire, 42% believe they'll never have enough savings to do so. 2,000 adults, March survey of this year. They were talking to Gen Z, millennials, and boomers, I guess. Gen X, too, I suppose.
They're talking to younger individuals who...
Well, they went across the board here. Boomers apparently were most afraid that they would run out of money because they're pretty much in retirement. But even those in Gen X, 18% of those do not believe retirement is in their future.
That's an interesting... They're going to retire someday, so it is in their future.
Permanent retirement is in everybody's future.
Yes, so that's an...
I don't understand that.
Well, to be honest, I think some of it comes to... A lot of the people I've met with over the years that were afraid they'd never have enough money to retire work off of very faulty information. They work off of, being told that they're not going to have enough, being told that you need to have these giant retirement numbers to be able to retire comfortably. And they don't know the math well enough. Unfortunately, nobody knows the math. I mean, math just is one of those foreign topics that people don't want to know. And it is financial math, which does take some strange calculations to be able to put together, but they don't do the math, they don't do the planning, and they accept the words that people are telling them, you're never going to have enough to retire. You're never going to be able to retire. And they start basically making it a self-fulfilling prophecy. And they just well, I'm never going to be able to retire. They don't ever actually look into it about what is going on and how do I make this work? How do I, instead of just accepting that I'll never be able to, how do I make something work? I'm still in my 40s or 50s. I have a little bit of time. It's a much more difficult discussion or planning process when you're 70 and you've realized, well, I'm never going to retire. And because I never thought I was going to retire or never thought I'd be able to retire, I didn't save anything and I didn't do anything to get ready for it. It is one of those facts that at some point in your life, you're going to retire, either in retirement or permanently, as you said.
Well, and here's something else. About a third of Americans say they don't have a strong understanding of what to do to plan for retirement.
That's a problem. I know. Because it comes from an area that it involves a different language, financial ease. It involves different math other than just, adding and subtracting.
Well, and they don't understand some of the most common financial
terminology,
products and things like that. More than half, 59%, don't have a 401k. Really?
I didn't think it was that high.
I didn't either. It must be just from this survey. I would have to look at the official statistics. What is it?
But even if you don't have a 401k, you have the ability to save money on a tax-deferred basis if you want to.
Or just save money.
It's a little bit more difficult because you don't sign up for it and have it automatically taken out of your paycheck before you see it.
Yeah.
You'll see the money going into an IRA. That is a tax-deferred account, and it works very much like a 401k with the exception of it doesn't come out of your paycheck.
Well, so what do we do about this? This episode is going to be about, I guess, maybe allaying some of those fears of some people who think that they aren't going to have enough for retirement. Now, Professor, there are people who, don't have a lot saved up and they need, 50 grand from their portfolio and they've got, maybe 150 grand saved up.
And they're 70 years old now.
And they're 70 years old now.
Well, that's a problem because now we have to look at, where is the money going? Presumably at age 70, you have some Social Security or a pension, one of the two. And so you have some money over and above what that portfolio distribution is. So where are the expenses coming from? For a lot of people that get into retirement, the biggest expense is their home. And that's a change from years before when almost everybody that retired, a high percentage, had a paid off home. And the housing prices weren't as crazy as they are now. But a lot of times what we see people doing when they get into their mid-50s, instead of downsizing their house, they upsize it. They go to a bigger house. Just about the same time the kids go to college. And so now they got all these expenses and they don't need the big house and they don't have the ability to save so much. But they love the house and they want to keep the house through retirement. And so
we see that quite a bit.
Where are the expenses going? If you've gotten yourself into the situation that John just explained, there's going to be some unfortunate, hard decisions that you have to make. You're not going to be able to save a whole lot more. And where is the money going? So we have to have that kind of discussion. Now, if you're 45 and you're looking at it, now that has to do with planning and basically creating that discipline of saving, which is such a hard discipline to create and cultivate.
Well, presumably, if you're making it on whatever you're making now, if you're able to at least get by on whatever savings you have, not savings, whatever income you have now, right? I mean,
I remember this was a couple decades ago. I was talking with somebody first time, never talked to them before, and they were like, they wanted to get a debt reduction plan in place. They had a lot of debt, and none of it was home debt. It was all credit cards, signature loans, and things of that nature. And said, well, what we can do is this, and we start attacking this one. No, I don't think you understand. You wanted to reduce this debt. No, I want it to go away. Figure out a way to. I can't afford to pay this off. I want a debt reduction plan that just gets rid of it.
Well,
I was like, I don't know if I can help you with this one. Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think they could at that time because they had one not too long before. This was years ago. But
okay, so there are situations like that.
Put their head in the sand and they just don't want to know.
But I think people are. You started to say this, and you were correct. That I think people are under the assumption that they need more money to retire, possibly, than they really do.
Well, and part of that comes from the idea that the financial calculators that out there, they look at, okay, what do you need to spend? I'm making $100,000 a year right now, so you're going to need some percentage of that, and let's just say I need 80% of that. So I need $80,000 a year. Going forward. So they take that $80,000 number and they inflation adjust it every year from here forward to the end of time. And unfortunately for the math, the reality is it doesn't work quite like that. If you take that number and you just inflate it every year and then you look, okay, what is inflation? Well, inflation last year was 8% or whatever it was. And so I'm going to inflate it at 8%. The numbers get very large very quickly when you inflate it that high of a number. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do some inflation adjustment. That is a reality. It does affect retirees, but it doesn't affect them all the same way. And so how is your income structured? What's going on? And let's use an inflation that's more reasonable. It was 8% last year, but before that, it was like 1%. Historically, it's in the 3 to 4% range. But even at 3 and 4%, if you do that every year until you're 100 years old, it creates a very large amount of cash flow that you need to create, 30, 40 years from now if you're a 60, 70-year-old.
Yeah, I need $80,000 today, but 30 or 20 years from now, $80,000, I'm going to, if you inflation index that every single year, that number, as Professor Plum is looking at his calculator, I was trying to stall. But let's say, what would that be 20 years from now at even just say 2.5 or 3% inflation?
Well, $80,000 a year at 3% inflation 30 years from now is close to $200,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, you try to.
The reality is, when you're between 60 and 70, maybe a little longer, yeah, inflation does affect you. That's when you're doing everything. That's when you're doing things. But as you get older, with the exception of healthcare, and healthcare doesn't account for everything, your expenses tend to stabilize. And in fact, in many cases, they might go down a little bit. And so that's where if I need $200,000 30 years from now and, $196,000, you bring that back. How much do I need today in a portfolio to provide that large income stream? I need a big number. But if the reality is I only need $110,000 30 years from now instead of $200,000, the portfolio that I need to have today is much smaller. And so we have to be realistic about how we go about creating the math, and just having a straight calculator that says, inputs are, set and they don't vary from year to year, may not be doing yourself justice. And it may just be scaring the living heck out of you. And unfortunately for some people, it scares you into inaction. It's like, well, I'm never going to get there, so why even try?
So if somebody says, look, I know what I'm making now, and I can get by on this, and I'm okay, and I want to retire in 5 years, how much money do I need? How do I know how much money I'm going to need? Can I just if I can replace what I'm making now in my job and never have any more than that, does that work?
Yeah, but what are you making right now? If you're making $100,000, you're not spending $100,000.
No, what I'm taking home. Let's say you look at what you're taking home. You make $100,000, but you're taking home,
Okay. How much you putting in your 401k?
60 or something. You're putting 20 in your 401k, and
I don't need to replace that 20.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And so I'm taking home 60, but that's after withholding for taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have to account for some taxes, or do we? Depending on where your income is. So you just have to start making some adjustments. Yes. Can you do $60,000? Well, it depends on when you want to retire. You want to retire at 48? Maybe not. You want to retire at 65, 70? Yeah, probably, depending upon, have you done any? You said you were saving 20% into your 401k. Well, that's a nice number. That's a pretty good size number for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
That should be adding up. Did you just start yesterday, or have you been doing it for a while? How big is your 401k? You may have been over saving. You may,
which we've talked about before.
And we've had discussions with people that it was a matter of, okay, so you've got this going on, got this. The question I have for you at this point, why are you working?
Well, there you go.
It's come up more that way than, you really need to keep working. I've had more conversations of, why are you still working? If you say this is your goal, you've got your goal met and then some. But they didn't realize that because they weren't able to take the static value of today and look at it from a stream of income and say, do I have enough to create that stream of income? Because they were looking at it, they say I can only use 3%, maybe 4%, but
You mean as a withdrawal rate?
As a withdrawal rate, but but there are lots of factors involved in how your net income or your need is created. As I said, it doesn't have to inflate with inflation every year most of the time. Also, at some point, unless you just took out the house mortgage, your mortgage is going to be paid off at some point, which means that a percentage or a certain amount of your income will drop off. Maybe it's only 10 more years left. I was meeting with somebody the other day who got a late start, but they have 6 years left on a mortgage, and so about the time they want to retire, they don't need what they're earning now because they won't have the same expenses that they're paying now. Because their mortgage is going to go away. They want to retire in 5 or 6 years. And they're looking at, I'm making $100,000. I'm going to need, 80, 90,000 because that's what I'm spending right now or whatever the number was. But they don't need that much because their house payment was X. And or at least the principal and interest was. They're still going to be expensive.
So for somebody who's just, say, they've got a 401k, maybe a married couple, they both have a 401k. They add up to maybe $500,000 of 401k, and that's pretty much all that they've saved.
Yeah, it's still a good number.
It's not a bad number, and let's say they need, $60,000 a year.
Okay.
So they might look at that and say, well, wow, wait, $500,000. wait a minute, I
What's
need,
their Social Security going to be?
well, that's where I'm going. So let's start with this. Somebody who only has a 401k, it's worth $500,000 because they've done a pretty good job saving, let's say, between a spouse, both spouses. So it adds up to that. But they need about $60,000 a year. Okay. First place you would start would be Social Security. And they might say, well, oh, right, Social Security. Okay, well, I probably got about $30,000.
Well, let's not play with probably. Let's talk about reality.
Let's put one. Let's just say I've got $30,000 of Social Security. We both have, about $1,500 a month, something like that.
Okay, that's a little low for
well, it is
today,
a little low, but I'm
okay. So 30,000.
All right. Well, then let's say maybe one spouse didn't work a lot. All right. So is that too low?
No, it's lower than what I'm seeing right now. But
all right, put a number in that you like.
Well, no, let's take 30. How much do you need a year? You wanted 60?
I want 60 because I've been netting 60 since I've
And
I've
you
been
want to
working.
retire now or in a couple of years? What do you need?
Let's say I want a couple of years. A couple of years, it might as well be now.
No, because the Social Security will go up for a couple of years because I'm assuming they're not 70, and their portfolio hopefully will go up a little bit, especially since they're saving
All right, so
into
let's say a couple of years.
So
let's say I want to retire in a couple of years.
I mean, right now, if you're taking 30,000 out of 500,000, that's about a 6% distribution. That's a little on the high side, but is your mortgage going to be paid off anytime soon? Are there any expenses that may not be there forever? And so, depending upon how old they are, if they're 60s, I'd say
they've got
we're going to work another couple of years.
They're 62. They want to work. They want to quit when they're 65.
Okay, so we're going to
put Medicare kicks in at that point.
Oh yeah, that is a big issue for a lot of people. Where am I going to get the money to pay for my health care until I'm 65?
Yeah.
So you're $500,000. You're going to add another $20,000 a year to it. You were saying how much you putting in?
Let's say it's about 20. Let's say
it's going to be 560. And then maybe with a little bit of growth. No,
not guaranteed.
That's just adding your contributions. That's growth.
But that also means that there's no big downturn that you've allocated your
assets. If you're within 3 years of retirement, a downturn today, you should have your portfolio allocated in a way that a downturn today is not going to affect your income for the first 8, 9, 10 years of retirement.
So
now
let's say
strategy, but
3 years, it's about $550,000.
Okay. So now we need 30,000 out of 550. It's about a 5% distribution. Now that's a more reasonable distribution. If we can get a little growth, it might be a little less. But so it's about a 5.5% distribution. But we're still, you can probably do it. It's going to be a little tight. The saving grace here is that do you have a mortgage that's going to be paid off at some point within the next 10, 15, 20 years? Because then your income will come down.
Is 5% too much to take out of a 401k?
Not necessarily out of a portfolio.
Well, let's say in this case, I'm saying it's a 401k because right now it's all pre-tax money. That's, you got to factor in taxes and all that.
Well, right. But we're factoring taxes on if you got 30,000 and 30,000, 45, you're not really in a very high tax bracket. Not about half of your Social Security may be taxable. So you don't have a big tax bill at that level.
Okay.
So let's first off look at what the tax bill is going to be and what your income is. So if we're looking at you want 60,000 net after taxes?
Yes, because supposedly
you might have to work a couple more years, or you may have to figure out a way to cut some of your expenses. But we've got 3 years, maybe a little bit more, to be able to figure out where is the money going.
So if you use 5% number,
right, 5%. If we need a little bit more, it's a little on the high side, especially for the younger. I mean, if you're 70 years old, I'm not so worried. If you're 60 years old, I'm a little bit cautious about that.
Well, we're making these guys 65.
So you're in the middle. So I'm.
Are you okay with that or not?
I'm okay with it if you can tell me that your mortgage will be paid off in 10 years, 15 years.
Okay.
Because then I can reduce that distribution by a significant number. Mm-hmm. Most people's mortgages are more than $200 or $300, so it's going to have an impact. I mean, if your mortgage is $1,000 a month, you take that $30,000 need down to what, 18?
If it's $2,000 a month, you take it way down.
Yeah. So that means that it can be something that we really look at. So that's where we're going to get into the actual planning. But like I said earlier, though, if you're 3 years out from retirement and you're worried about a downturn in the market right now or the next year, and so you don't have a strategy in place to protect yourself from that. Mm-hmm. I mean, the market is unknown. The market is volatile. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. The only problem is we don't know exactly how much or when or what direction it's going to go. And nothing you do can control the movement of the market. So you have to do something in your planning that takes that unknown variability out of the equation. And the only way to do that is to have enough money out of that $500,000 portfolio, have some of it. You need $30,000 a year. Have 150 of it safe. I'm just looking at just basic math.
Yeah.
If I'm retiring in 3 years and I want some time for the market to recover in case the market crashes tomorrow, put 150,000 of that 500,000 in something very safe. Your stable value fund, your treasuries, your whatever the case may be, to make it safe, so that you know that you've got 5 years. Is that right? Yeah, 5 years. 30 times.
Yeah. Wait.
30 times 5.
150. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Got to do our math in our head here real quick while we're flying. I know I've got 5 years of cash flow that I can rely on, and that gives me 8 years from today that I don't have to worry about the market. And most 8-year periods of time, not all, most 8-year periods of time, even if the market crashes tomorrow, it will have recovered by the end of the 8th year. Not all, but it gives us a really good start. So then we have some other money that's in a more moderate area that has a little bit of volatility, so that it buys me some more time. Yeah, so the whole idea is to strategize how to put your portfolio up. So maybe only 200, I don't know what the number is, 250, 220, I haven't done the math, of your portfolio is actually at the whim of the market, so to speak.
Invested in stocks, equities of some kind.
Now, if I've got that 220 invested in the market and I'm putting in money every month, every paycheck, I'm taking advantage of that dollar cost averaging on that. But I've got at least 8 years. I've also got some money safe or in moderate accounts, because I've got 150,000 in moderate accounts if I only have 200 in growth.
Gives you a little bit of.
I've got 10, 12, 15 years for that market to recover.
So what you've done right here is you've
bucketized them.
You've bucketized this because what you don't want to have happen is somebody with this $500,000 401k, and they say, I'm going to take 5% out of it, which is $25,000 a year. Well, 5.6. You see, we grew it to 550. So let's say $30,000 a year, about 5%. You don't want him to say, okay, I'll just leave it in 100% stocks. I'll sell off a chunk that I need. No,
because if you do leave yourself 100% stocks, what if the next couple of years
are bad?
Are like the 2000 to 2002 time horizon? Now you don't have 550. You have a lot less. What if it's 2007 to 2009?
Yeah.
What if it's 2022? And who knows how long after this?
I remember 2022.
If you are retiring into or just before a downturn, you have a problem if you are taking money out of a volatile portfolio. Now, I don't know when the next significant downturn is going to be, whether it be tomorrow or 10 years from now. But we're going to have another downturn.
Yeah.
So we have to protect against it. And the only way to protect against it is to not be in a position where you have to sell in the middle of it.
And that's the whole point of the bucketizing, which is to buy you some time, because time is your most crucial factor.
So let's take a realistic look at your expenses, add in what the taxes are going to do to you, find out what the total gross income need is, subtract out Social Security and pensions, and find out what the portfolio has to provide, and then look at, are you in a position where you have to take a much harder look at your expenses, or is this a reasonable way to do things, but then protect yourself against those potential downturns that could happen at any time. The reality is, if they do happen, it's better to be protected than being 100% invested and actually have the markets go up a lot. Sure, you'll make more money that way, but
but you're also going to lose more when it crashes.
But but for somebody who retired at the right time, and gambled and won, the amount of money they have in excess of where they would have been by protecting themselves is that going to make them that much happier?
Well, what you've just done, Professor Plum, is you've answered this question of somebody who's got $500,000 saved, and that's all they have. That's the example I gave. They have $500,000. This couple, they've been saving in their 401ks, and they've done that, but they have no idea. They looked at their portfolio and said, wait, we have $500,000, but we're living on $60,000 net right now per year. $500,000, that's a 10-11% withdrawal rate, 12% maybe. And I've heard that that's not going to happen.
I looked at the calculators.
How can I possibly retire? This, I think, is where the fear comes in.
Well, and I've looked, I'm the client in this speaking. I looked at the calculators, and assuming a 3% inflation and an overall portfolio of X, I need to have almost $800,000 to give myself that 300 or that 30,000 a year.
Yeah, if you go out to an online calculator, because you got to give yourself that
even
raise
if I
every
just
year.
do the 4% rule, that's $750,000. I'm going to
Wow.
be short. But that also assumes that I'm inflation adjusting my income each and every year from here until the day we're no longer here, which is not going to be a reality. And some of those expenses may drop off, like if you have a mortgage I've talked about. That's the biggest one that people forget about.
Yeah, and of course it's not factoring in any Social Security. Maybe you have pensions too, but maybe you don't. Let's just say you have Social Security.
Well, I was factoring in the $30,000 a year, which was the portfolio.
Yes,
need.
the $30,000. Yeah, but even so.
But most people, I don't know anybody who does not have either a Social Security benefit or a pension.
Mm-hmm.
Some
have both.
Some have both. I do know people that have fairly low Social Securities that don't have pensions, even though they made pretty good money through their working careers because they were self-employed and they wrote everything off and they just haven't built up a large Social Security. And so it's just the way it works.
But the point here is, before we run out of time, is that just looking at the numbers, the bare numbers, you might think you can't retire.
Right.
But
if you just run the average calculator to get that $30,000 a year, I need $750,000.
No.
And if you're saying, well, I only have 500, I'm 3 years away. I am so done. It's going to take me working until I'm 75 to get up to $750,000. Of course, by the time you're 75, you don't need the 750 anymore because you have a shorter life expectancy. I don't need 30 years worth of income.
No, maybe 20. And I've been working a so stressful job, I may only need about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The way I'm feeling.
Well, and that's another, that's one thing. The more you stress about it, the shorter your life expectancy is.
Well, there are two things that are important here. Number one, you don't necessarily, you may not need as much to retire on as you thought you did, based on the calculators and the 4% and don't take 10% and all that other stuff. Run the numbers, but you need to, the other important thing that you brought up is allocate properly the savings that you have. You mentioned bucketizing in our example, bucketizing this $500,000, $550,000 401k, the savings that they have. Those are the two important things that you need to take away from this episode today, is that you may be able to retire on what you have, even though it doesn't look like you can. And if it's, I'll say, properly bucketized, you may be able to make it last longer than you thought you could.
Right. And the other thing is, know what your expenses are and how long they're going to last and what they are. And one of the biggest ones that you need to know is, what is your tax bill going to be? Because that person in our example that was getting $30,000 from their tax deferred account and $30,000 from Social Security, their total income is $60,000, but they're not going to be taxed on anything near $60,000 because at that level, their adjusted gross income on their tax return before deductions, before standard deductions, only $36,000, $37,000, and then you take off, almost $30,000 for your standard deduction. Currently, and you're gonna be paying like $600 a year in taxes.
Yeah,
and so the taxes in that particular issue are not that big of a deal. But sometimes people underestimate their taxes. So when you're getting ready and you're planning for retirement, know what your expenses are. And one of those expenses is taxation. How are you going to deal with that taxability? And
the numbers you just brought up, I think most people wouldn't know that their taxes were going to be that low.
Yeah, I've got $60,000 in total income in this hypothetical example, and my tax bill is $700.
How can that possibly be? Well, I mean, these are the things you need to know, which is why it's helpful to have an advisor help you out. And that's my third point here before we wrap this up, is that it's helpful to have somebody who knows how these tax brackets work. Somebody who can take whatever your savings is and say, look, let's siphon some of this stuff up. Let's put a strategy together.
Break down your expenses, find out what's going on, and apply the appropriate strategy. Match your assets and your liabilities. If I need to spend money in the next several years, short term, that requires a short-term asset to cover it. That's what got the Silicon Valley Bank in trouble. That's what got Orange County in trouble in 1994.
And First Republic, what was the other one that just, as of
that
this
was
recording?
bad management. I don't know if it was the same bad management, but I know that Silicon Valley Bank was longer-term assets for shorter-term liabilities.
They should have been bucketized.
They should have been.
Yeah.
They're a bank, for heaven's sake. They're supposed to know finance.
Yeah, but the money was there.
They had other issues,
The money was there. They said, well, but we can do this. We can charge fees. Yeah. Anyway, you want to get in touch with Professor Plum to talk about this stuff if you're not properly bucketized. If you've been working with him, then I would suggest that you are. But for those who aren't, for those who have been wondering, well, I'm one of these people that they surveyed, and I didn't think I could retire because I was told that I don't have enough money. I got, $500,000, which seems like a lot, but I need $60,000 a year in this example. Well, I mean, I can't possibly retire, so I'll be working till I'm 90. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be like the Rolling Stones where you have to go out on tour because you don't have enough money to retire. Right? I don't know why I thought that. It just occurred to me they're still working.
Who was it a couple weeks ago announced their final world tour? I think it's their final farewell. Aerosmith, I think, a couple weeks ago announced their final.
But haven't they had like 4 of them?
I don't remember them having one, but
I mean, what Mick Jagger,
he's Stones.
But I know that, but he's what? He's like 97. I think he just turned 97 this year.
He's probably in his 70s. He just looks 90.
I think they're closer to 80.
Well, maybe.
I think they are. Anyway, doesn't matter. You don't want to be working forever. All right? You want some time to enjoy life. Get in touch with Professor Rick Plum or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors. They can help you out with not just the tax management of it, like we talked about, and not just determining whether or not you can retire on what you have, but they can also help you with the bucketization of it. Did you look it up?
He'll be 80 this year.
I told you, because I think I know Ringo's over 80, and Paul, I think, is turning 80 or just did. Anyway.
His birthday's in June.
Whose?
Paul's.
Oh, is it June? I know Ringo's is July 7th.
Yeah, Paul shares one with my wife.
Oh, there you go.
Different year, but
well, yeah, I would hope so. Anyway, 800-644-1150 before we get out of control here. 800-644-1150, the number at Lucia Capital Group. They talk about this stuff all the time. This is the bucketizing is what they do, the advisors, and they've been doing it for a long, long time. 800-644-1150. Go online, luciacap.com, luciacap.com. Find all this information there and a whole bunch of videos. Man, we got a lot of videos up there. I should have counted how many videos you've done and Joey and
do we have
Ray
that much time to count those all?
Well, I don't, but I mean, if there's a financial topic that you need help with, go to luciacap.com, type it in the little find your answer box up there, and you're probably going to find it.
And if you can't, let us know. Maybe we'll discuss it.
Absolutely. Tell us, hey, I'd love to hear about this.
Yeah.
In fact, I should look again at the emails. I haven't looked for the last couple of days to see if people had some suggestions as to what they'd like us to talk about. All right, luciacap.com. Also, as I said earlier, go to Spotify or iTunes. You can download this podcast and listen to it regularly. You don't want to miss any of this wonderful information. It is managing your financial future. Professor Plum, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
As always, and we'll be back next week with who knows what. More managing your financial future. For Professor Rick Plum, I'm your host, Johnny Dean. Take care. We'll see you again next week. The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and/or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy will be profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Lucia Capital Group or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material is gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Before investing, carefully consider a stable value fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. To obtain a prospectus or summary prospectus, which contains this and other information, call your financial advisor. Read the prospectus carefully before investing. Treasury securities are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, but are subject to inflation risk. A dollar costs
cost-averaging strategy does not guarantee a profit or protection from loss. Since such an investment plan involves continual investment in securities regardless of fluctuating price levels, you must consider your willingness to continue purchasing during periods of high or low price levels. Rick Plum and Joe P. Lucia are registered representatives with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.